In the back seat, remove the carpet right here. There is a twist lock, twist that, and slide this out of the way. Make sure the seat is all the way back, and then grab this trim piece and just pull straight up. There's some locks that hold it down. Use a T20 socket, remove this screw, and grab this cover, slide it up and outwards. Use a 10mm socket, loosen up the negative terminal, grab the connection, and just slide it out of the way. Take this ground connection off, just use a 15mm wrench, loosen it up. Now disconnect the weather stripping right here, and on the other side we're going to remove this panel. There's a whole bunch of push pins throughout the truck. Just use a trim tool, get underneath there. If you have to, some of them are tight, you can use a pick and take all those off. And just grab that panel and slide it out. Take this cover off, there's a cap, take the oil cap off, and grab the cover, slide it up and out of the way, and just so nothing falls down in there, put the oil cap back on. Take the fuse box cover off, there's a couple locks on the side, push down on those. Now pull this cover off. Use a 13mm socket and remove the nut. And take the wires off, out of the way. Use a 10mm socket and loosen up these two screws. This is what connects the connectors to the bottom of the fuse box, so the bolts are not going to come out. Give it a couple turns, and that should be good. And the fuse box is clicked in with all these little tabs. You're just going to have to go around the fuse box and lift up on the tabs. Just use a straight blade screwdriver. Pry up on the box a little bit as you're doing it, and in the back as well. Sometimes they click back in. And just slide up. And if the connector is still connected, you might have to loosen up those screws again. This connector is two harnesses connected together. And if you flip it over and use a straight blade screwdriver, in between here, there's a tab. You can slide that tab over, and then you can separate them. Just like that. There's the little tab. And this connector, just pull this out to the side. Then this plastic housing comes up. Just use a small screwdriver, and move these tabs over. And it slides up and out of the way. And there's a connector right here. You can just slide up underneath here with a trim tool. There you go. You can disconnect the connector. Just push down on the tab. Separate the harness. Then this moves out of the way. And there's another harness right here. We'll just slide up underneath that. This one you don't have to disconnect. Just disconnect it from this panel or this plate. And there's a bolt right here, and there's two nuts over here. Use a 10mm socket and take those out. And grab the plate and slide it off. Take these two bolts out, use a 15mm socket. And you can slide this mount out of the way. And just slide it out. There is a slight gap right there. It's a little easier to slide that out first. To get this reservoir out of the way, I'm just going to take these three bolts out. Use a 10mm socket. And just grab the reservoir and slide it up. We're just going to spin it around, just leave it right there. This bracket, I want to remove this out of the way. There is two 15mm bolts right on top, but this hose is in the way and I don't want to disconnect that. So the lower bracket has two 18mm bolts. There was one there and there's one over here. So use an 18mm socket, loosen those up. And just take those out. And just slide the bracket out. So one of the cam sensors is right here, and there's 4 of them total. There's one further back here. We're gonna replace this one because that's the easiest one to see, but the procedure for the other 3 of them is gonna be the same. There's one on the back over here, and then on the front head, there's 2. The only difference on the front head ones is the bracket for the power steering reservoir needs to be removed. There's 2 10mm bolts that you'd have to take out, 10mm nuts on the top, and then just move that to the side. Now we'll disconnect the connector. There we go. Just squeeze the connector, push down, and slide it out. And take that out, and grab the sensor. You can twist it back and forth a little bit. If you have to, carefully use a screwdriver and pry it out. Try not to break it. There we go. And slide it out. Now we're going to install the new one. You can use some O-ring lubricant to help install it. And just slide it in position. Just rotate it a little bit. Get the bolt started. And snug it down. Just snug, not too tight. Now line the connector up and lock it down. With the belt on, I'm just gonna snug these bolts up a little more just because it will hold the pulley from spinning. Now install this bracket. And snug these bolts up. And I'll put this mount in. Just slide it back in position. And get those bolts started. And tighten the bolts down. Slide the reservoir back in position. Get the bolts started. Install this plate. Make sure the wiring harness is pulled above it. You go over this stud and over this stud. And get the bolt and the 2 nuts started. And tighten them down. Now secure this connector together and then lock that down in the retainer. Just push it down. And then this one over here, just line that up, push it down. And this lower fuse box cover, get that lined up. Lock it down. This connector is going to go right here, and then these 2 are going to connect together like that and rest right there. And take the fuse box, line it up, lock it down. Then you can take a Phillips head screwdriver and just slowly tighten this up. And there's a little window right here. As you tighten this up, once the connector gets to the top, you can see this little orange tab thing. And right there, when you tighten it and it releases, you know that's tight. Do the same on this one. Now take these cables, put this one down first, the one that has the little ear there, and then the longer one goes on second. And take the nut, put that on, and snug this down. Put the cover on. And put this cover on. Put all the push pins back in. Put this ground terminal back on and just snug it down. And put the engine cover back on. And the oil cap. Now I'll reconnect the battery. And snug this down. Make sure this is not loose. Put the cover on. And the screw. Tighten the screw down. And just line this up. Lock it down. And put the carpet in place. And then you can twist the lock.